All right, welcome back to Snakefang Podcast. I'm your host, Logan James, and I'm actually welcomed by two individuals that have not been on the show, and it's not Greg Matthews, so thank God for that. I'm with Calvin Rosser, and I'm actually with Thor Johnson, a good friend of mine. Calvin, you're the cousin of Thor.
That's right.
Yeah, and I've known Thor forever, and I've previously just hung out with you, like, intermittently and stuff like that, but what have you been up to lately? Like, I know what this clown's been up to, but what have you been up to lately?
Where should I start, man?
Let's start at your life, because your life's pretty interesting. Let's just start at like after you graduated high school.
Okay. So I graduated high school here in Orlando, and I went to Princeton for school. I had always wanted to go to an Ivy League school and kind of worked hard to get there. And when I got to Princeton, it was a pretty big difference for me from where I was from, because I grew up in poverty, if you will, and coming to Princeton, it's not that there weren't other poor kids, but it wasn't necessarily the norm. And then I would say that the academic standards were a lot harder. So in my first 6 to 12 months, there was a big adjustment there at Princeton. And, at school, what I studied was public policy. I was always interested in just solving problems. And at Princeton, public policy was an interdisciplinary major where you studied economics, psychology, science, etc., to solve real problems. So an example of that is my junior year, I went to Barcelona, and it was right around the time of the Euro crisis. And so I actually looked at, Spain had unemployment at about 50% for young people. And I examined, why is that? In the US, other places it's 20-30%. And, that was kind of one of the ways in which you solve policy problems, which are real world problems.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that's crazy to even talk about. Yeah, when you talked about it's different academics in regards to Princeton, it's like, yeah, look at us, look at me and this guy, we're from this area, completely different. But no, that's super cool. And Thor, you went to Miami University.
Yes.
And University of Miami. Sorry for that. Hurricanes. Let's go Hurricanes. And you studied what?
I studied economics.
Okay, you studied economics, and then you were only there for 4 years, and you didn't go and get your master's. And then you've been in this area.
Yep, since I left school, I've been doing consulting for a software company.
Nice. That's super cool. And you've been here for what, 2 years now?
Yes.
Nice. And then you, after Princeton, went and worked remotely or worked somewhere. I don't know the whole story.
A couple different things.
There was a step in between the remote. So basically, when I went to school, I didn't have money. And my main goal, and for most of my life, and what really drove me to work hard was, hey, bring yourself out of this poverty, make money. So the first job I took after Princeton was in investment banking. So I worked in mergers and acquisitions in New York, and it was a good business experience. It was 15 hours a day in a cubicle, but most importantly, at the time, it was a good paycheck. And a few months in, there were a couple things I realized. One was, you don't need that much money to be happy once you have kind of this baseline comfort level and aren't thinking about how much a Starbucks coffee costs, and you kind of have that baseline comfort. You start to think differently, and that's what happened to me. And I realized very quickly that a good paycheck just wouldn't do it for me. So I looked to escape the cubicle as quickly as I could. And the job I took after, which I had a buddy who had, the year I was spending all this time in the cubicle, he was traveling the world, and he was actually getting a ton of good career experience working for a company called TopTal. And so I applied to that company and ended up on their growth team, and which was unrelated to my major or my previous job, but basically you just had to be a smart, analytical, hungry person. And so for about a year and a half, I ended up traveling the world with my buddy and some other people, went to 25-30 countries working for this company remotely on their growth team, which my main job was just to grow revenue. And that's an ambiguous, hard problem, and there's always more revenue to be had. So it was a fun one to have.
Yeah, no, that sounds crazy. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today, because you just said that you've been to 20 to 30 countries. So you're basically getting an insight in each culture, their different ideals, their understandings of life. And then just from what you said previously, how you said that the paycheck didn't matter to me. There was more to life than that. I know that me and Thor, and in our where we're at right now, we sort of feel that way, and from you just saying it, you're doing it, it's pretty cool. I mean, Thor, we basically talk about this all the time. I mean, that's a super cool life, and there's more to life than just monetization, I would say, or materialistic objects. And that goes into like one of the things that I want to talk about just for a little bit is just like philosophies. I don't know if you guys know anything about philosophies. I'm sure Calvin does. Thor, dude, you have literally a hammer. Like you're a god from a different realm. You should know a lot about philosophies and gods and all this stuff. But I just want to talk about, because you were like literally talking about the same things that I think about every day. And these philosophies, these two philosophies that I look into here and there, just like lead me in the right direction, which is idealism and stoicism. I don't know if you know either of those philosophies. Are you?
I know a bit about Stoicism. I've read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, which is a classic introduction. And,
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss and Ryan Holiday, some of these other kind of self-development gurus, if you will, talk a lot about Stoicism. I think there's a lot of power there. I wouldn't call myself an expert.
No, and neither am I. This is just a casual conversation. I know Thor knows barely any, but that's great, because then you can ask some questions. I mean, I don't know that much either, I'm not going to lie. But this is just like to move forward with this. Like,
well, I'll tell you one cool thing about Stoicism that I do know.
Yeah.
So about a few months ago, I guess 5 months ago, my mom committed suicide. And at that moment, I was faced with, this big challenge of, hey, your mom just committed suicide. You have to kind of learn how to move forward in all of this. And I actually talk about this in the eulogy that I delivered for her, but I use Stoic principles to feel better, if you will, about this event and to help process my grief. And specifically, the Stoics and Steve Jobs talked about this as well, but basically, when you understand that you're mortal, which we all are, obviously, but it's not something that is really the first thing that comes to mind, you can kind of have a bit more compassion for, other people, and then also move through life when you face adversity, because, life is a series of challenges, and what really matters is how you respond to those challenges. And when you realize the end is in sight, which is something that I think Stoics in particular meditate on, even when those tragic things happen to you, it doesn't take away the pain, but it helps you kind of put it into perspective and to move forward productively. And so actually Stoic principles were something that have helped me in the grieving process a lot. And I'd say that's where I've used them the most. And that's where I think Stoicism is cool. It's a practical philosophy. It's not.
Yeah, no, it's super practical. And that's the one that I like look at the most, because like how you're talking about, like Stoics basically say that every day is like a new day. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like you have to understand, you use logic, you understand what occurred, but you move on from that. You see what happened. You see if it was a terrible accident, but you don't use destructive like emotions like that, anger or sulking and stuff like that, which is great because you understand exactly what occurred. It's terrible, but tomorrow is a new day. You have to keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. That's going to be there regardless. There's nothing that you can do. It's outside of your means. That's one of the things that they talk about. If it's outside, it's literally outside of your means for something of that nature that occurred for you to do anything about. So understand it, possibly learn by it, and move forward. Don't self-destruct. Don't like implode. And every day after that for the next 5 months, you're sitting in a room sulking or just not doing anything, which, I mean, of course, be sad, like stuff like that. That's terrible. What happened to your mother? That's awful. Like, be sad, but move forward with it. And that's one of the things that, like, with Stoicism that I really, really like, because I used to have, like, that self-destructive, like, emotion. Like, I played baseball in college, and I was terrible. And I would get mad all the time. I get super mad. I was awful. But now looking back on it, I just wasted time essentially, because I could have realized, I could have used logic and said, hey man, listen, you suck. Okay. You're not that good. It's fun what you're doing, but you got to understand, you can't get so mad on yourself. Tomorrow, just be happy. But I would literally have anxiety. I'd be depressed. I'd be punching. I tore out a water fountain one time from a dugout. I don't what it was I think
I
we
didn't
played,
know any of this.
We played South Alabama, and I shit the bed and just walked in, and I just like looked at that water fountain, and I just tore it out of the ground, and my coach started yelling at me. I mean, of course he has good reason to yell at somebody just destructed property of another school, and so I just like put it back up. Nobody said anything after that. But yeah, you can't live life like that. You got to move on.
Well, you can live like that. I mean, I feel you there. I played golf growing up, and very similar. I'd say, anger was something that came up a lot, and I'd slam the club and do all these other things. But you have to ask yourself, is this productive? Is this serving me? And I think it's a process. It's not easy though. It's a good philosophy, but to really practice it, you need to, one, just make mistakes, but then reflect on them. Like, think about that.
Well, yeah, of course. And it's like you said, it's extremely hard. Like the things that they practice. One of the things, like, I live like a healthy lifestyle, and one of the Stoics' beliefs is like, I forget which philosopher said that, but it's you don't live. Wait, how does it go? You live to eat. No, you don't live to eat. You eat to live, is what he said. And people like basically like gluttony and all these things, they're just intaking all this food. And like one day I just realized, dude, I don't need to eat all of this food. I can just do certain things and be fine with it. I just need to intake the stuff to sustain life, and I'll be happier. In regards to just like my overall health, my body image. Like one day I just woke up and I was just like, man, you are out of shape. You look like Thor. What are you doing? And so, but I mean, I really, like, you guys are both healthy. Like that's one of the things that they practice, but that's extremely.
Try to be healthy.
Yeah, of course. This guy's over here. He's like, yeah, dude, I mean, really healthy. I'm like, what are you eating? He brings over like a casserole dish full of rice and tilapia. Huge. I'm like, are you eating all that? Yeah. I'm like, okay, that's healthy food, but you're eating 50,000 calories right now, buddy. You remember that?
I remember that. My diet has definitely changed.
But it's extremely hard to like incorporate that kind of diet, and that's something like the Stoics believed in. So like literally anything in regards to Stoicism is extremely hard to incorporate in your life. I know like Thor, like even though you don't practice, none of us practice really Stoicism, but like for me with you, like I never see you have a destructive attitude. I never see you have, like, you're always just a happy-go-lucky guy with everything. Sometimes you tell me the craziest stories and it makes no sense to me, but you're just a happy-go-lucky guy. Like, how do you do that? How do you, like, keep going and never have anger? I never see you angry. I never see you sad. You're just the same old Thor every single day in and day out.
I guess maybe to you, but it's like Calvin said, it's definitely a process you go through. You learn things. And I think I'm pretty happy and, pretty much the same throughout the day to other people. But I think there was a point in my life where I had those feelings of anger and, especially in my teenage years.
Yeah.
So I think it's just learning from that and a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah.
And just learning to keep those emotions in check.
Yeah, and now you're just super relaxed.
Yeah.
Kevin, I haven't talked to you in a while, but even previously, you were super. I think it's just like the family line right here. You guys are just super relaxed guys. Super.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'd say you got to cultivate it because, I think everyone has destructive tendencies within them. Some people are more up and down day to day or calm, and that could be related to your kind of biochemistry or your parents or whatever it may be. But, I think the important part here is we're all going to make mistakes. You don't want to eliminate your emotions. That's not the point of Stoicism, but kind of controlling your response. And when you're talking about healthy eating, it's really about moderation, or, said another way, like avoiding gluttony.
Yeah.
Right? It's avoiding these extremes, whether that's, anger, sadness, grief, depression, and recognizing your feelings when they come in, but, trying to capture them before they go down into some spiral that then leads to a reaction, because I think it's that reaction that you end up regretting and that you need to meditate or reflect on.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And the thing with like Stoicism, being Stoic, there's like a misinterpretation, because when people think like at the end of the day, Stoicism and Stoics, like that's back in the day. So it's people today maybe not even know about it, but if you talk to somebody that does know about Stoicism, or they don't believe in it, don't know a lot about it, they're like, yeah, you're a Stoic, you're unemotional, because like it was basically being free of passion. But there was a misinterpretation in regards to that word passion from the ancient times to now, and passion back then meant like anguish and suffering. So it was actually to be free from anguish and suffering, not to be free from passion. You can still have your passion, but be free from this anguish and this suffering that you have, and just move forward. Like, live life to the fullest, love every single day. And that's like, you need to take that into perspective and like understand it to the fullest and realize like, hey man, like tomorrow's going to be a great day. Today's a great day. Every day's a great day, and understand that, and just look at it in a logical sense. And I know that I'm trying to move forward like that now, but I still do have some of those tendencies because it's extremely hard. I have every day I'm like, man, this is a bad day. This is a terrible day for me, and I can't really do much about it, and it's awful. And then I have no like motivation. It's just awful for me. But then another philosophy that I want to talk to you about, because this one's just cool to me. Mm-hmm. It's one of the ones that I talk about in regards to like technology, is idealism. So it's basically that reality that we know it is fundamentally mental, or like we mentally constructed it. So basically everything that you see is due to you perceive it, it's your perspective, which is just like, that's a mind-blowing philosophy. And you're just taking that, and that's just like a crazy thing. It's just like one of the things like, yeah, we both see red, but what is this red to you? You know what I mean? This red to me is red, but it could be black too if we had switched eyes, and stuff like that. That's crazy. You're like, we could be living in a simulation, but we just perceive it as real. It's like basically our consciousness is just perceiving everything in front of us, but the only true aspect is our mind. There's no other objects around us besides our consciousness there, and it's just perceiving this entire reality, which is just a freaky type of like philosophy. I don't believe in that kind, but when I get into like technology, I mean, there's so many things that we're doing with technology that, hey man, anything's possible. I have no idea what's going to happen for the future, like with AI. I don't know if you just recently heard with like Google Duplex, where Google had the convention where they basically showed off their AI system that called a salon and literally had the same mannerisms as a human being. They scheduled an appointment, and the other person on the other line didn't know it was a robot. So like, that's insane to me. Idealism is essentially like out there. I don't know if you guys believe in something like that. Do you think that that could be a possibility, that we just perceive the things around us, and really what it is just we just have a consciousness? Like, you're not even real to me. I could be just doing this for no reason. Is that something that you guys think about at all?
Personally, I haven't looked too much into idealism, but
yeah.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
The question of like, does matter create consciousness, or does consciousness create the things that we see? So
exactly.
I've definitely pondered that, but I haven't looked too much into the philosophy of idealism.
Yeah.
You have to tell me more about like what is that philosophy value?
I mean,
things like that.
Yeah, the value is basically like there's just like a world doesn't truly exist outside of our minds. We're just perceiving it all.
Well, okay.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So I similarly don't know much about the actual philosophy there, but to your point on perception, regardless of whether you put that within this framework, your world is perception. That is what life is. Mm-hmm. Any set of events can be perceived in 1 to 10 ways, and there might be kind of truths and facts and rational ways of looking at things, but your world is perception. There's not much more to that. And I think if you want to tie that back to Stoicism, like one of the ways in which that's such a good philosophy is because you alter that perception in a productive way. Yeah. And so instead of seeing, in my case or in Thor's case, growing up in poverty or unideal conditions as something that's not good, it's not good, right? Like
no, it's terrible.
You wouldn't choose that.
Never.
But there's also a flip side of that where it created, at least for me, an immense drive to improve my circumstances. A drive that, now that I've improved those, really keeps elevating me and carrying me. And so that's all a perception. And on the flip side of that, you could just crumble in the face of that. You could say, my circumstances suck. And guess what? Yeah. The world is unfair. It's unjust. It's whatever. But, doing that is not the productive way forward. It's not the way that you're going to improve the conditions. And I think it takes a lot of courage to try and flip that perception and to continually do that especially when tragedy or malevolence hit. Yeah, no, of course. And that's why like hand in hand, like even though like with technology stuff, like I see them play a role together. Of course, like I still believe Stoicism fully, and like idealism, like with perception, like whatever you perceive, like, yeah, that's there, but change it. Like you can use that to a benefit. Like you said, like growing up in poverty, you can use that as like, I don't want to live this life anymore, so I'm going to study.
I'm going to learn coding. I'm going to learn a different language. I'm going to do all of these other things to benefit myself, to be more productive, than just be like, oh, I was dealt this terrible hand. I was dealt this thing that I can't even get out of. Like, no, there's always a way to get out of it. Now, what's your perception of getting out of it? Do you want to be a multi-billionaire? Like, or do you want to be happy with life? Like, there's two different routes you can think about. And that's where the perception comes into play and the stoicism comes into play, which are just two overall great philosophies to me. Now, I wanted to move forward into just like talking about life. That's what we're just talking about right now.
Talk about life.
Let's just talk. We're talking about life. We're talking about stoicism, talking about this. So Calvin, you have a website, I don't know what I would call this. It's a blog mixed with an actual business, right? So
yeah. So I mean, let me give you some context.
Yeah.
There. So I worked for this startup for a year and a half, TopTal, and then along the way I got very much into personal development and started speaking a lot with people, in some sense doing some informal life and business coaching, and really just seeing that there are essentially two things, at least at this point, that really drive me. One of them is learning, so personal learning, always making new distinctions, clarifying my views of the world. And the other was contribution. And at the point, about 6 months ago, by contribution I mean helping other people.
Yeah,
that is a way for me to find meaning. I'm not particularly religious or anything like this, but I get a lot of joy out of helping people. That's how I find my fulfillment. And so I wanted to explore an avenue where I could do that full time, which is just learn and help people. And so I could have tried to do that within my old job, which was a good job and that I enjoyed and all of that. But instead, I chose to go off on my own and create calvinrosser.com, which is really it is a business, but it's more a mission than anything.
Yeah.
So I set out January 1st of this year on a mission to help 10 million people live a more conscious and fulfilling life. And the way I've tackled that problem, because, by the way, there are a billion ways that you can tackle that problem, is to start writing and to start doing what we're doing right now, which is talking about my ideas openly and building a community. I have a newsletter called Life Reimagined that I send out every Sunday, and it's typically just an article or some thoughts that I have on some of these topics that we're talking about, which is, how do you overcome adversity? How do you set goals? How do you build more meaningful relationships?
Yeah.
All of these things that we all need to learn. By the way, you don't learn a lot of these things at any school, including Princeton.
Oh, yeah. You would agree, Thor?
I agree.
But it's really, to me, it's about living a balanced life as you define it. It's not that I know the answers or kind of have the right path, but really kind of thinking consciously about what do you want to spend your short time on here, and how do you do that? How do you start thinking about that?
Yeah.
It's complex.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And by the way, I actually signed up for that newsletter today. I hope to get it. Every Sunday. It's gonna be great because I just read through some of your articles, and one of the ones that I read through was the big challenge of being an adult, which is like what we're talking about in regards to like schooling and stuff like that. And one of the things that I like took from it was that map. Like you were talking about that basically going through school, you have this map, and then when you're outside it's like, oh, build your own map, which is extremely hard, or they have these maps that are already self-generated. Here, go to this, work at this company, but then you live in this world that's just like, oh yeah, I can't wait to get my vacation. I can't wait to do this. Like, but I'm staying here. I'm stressed. I hate being here. I hate doing this. But you're basically like, I need this map. I need to follow this, which I fully don't believe in. And I have like several friends of mine that were in the same kind of boat as you, where they were working at a 9-to-5 job, cubicle job, and they said they did things to be productive as they could during that time, because they were, of course, you need to have money coming in to finance like your rent or stuff like that. But they also utilize the time working outside of that to do their own projects, 6 hours, 7 hours a day after they already spent an 8-hour day in the office. And then after that, they're like, I don't need your map anymore. I just built my own map. And now I live the life that I want to live. I live it to the fullest, and I do things that are productive to me, not necessarily you. And I don't know if you know a Russian poet. His name's Charles Bukowski. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I've heard of Bukowski, yes.
Oh, so one of his quotes, let me just pull it up really quick if I can. One of his quotes was, "How in the hell could a person enjoy being awakened at 6:30 in the morning by an alarm clock, leap out of bed, dress, force feed, shit, piss, brush teeth and hair, and fight traffic to get to a place where essentially you made a lot of money for somebody else and were asked to be grateful for the opportunity to do so?" That's one of the quotes from him that I always like think about. Like, it doesn't like, I don't get saddened or angry by it because I am doing that. But I think about it, I'm like, why do I do this? And then it's like I build purpose on that. I'm like, I'm doing this to obtain a different goal. I'm doing this right now in this moment so I can obtain the goal right above it. Now, I still live every day to the fullest. I still don't get mad about my days. I still don't get upset about my days because I know that I'm reaching for a higher goal. And I love that. And I'm not necessarily living for the future either, because I'm living for now. Like, I'm doing this right now, and I love doing something like this, and I'm doing it now. Even though I'm working towards an overall arching goal, I still love every single day that I have. But this is one of the quotes from him that, like, I'm always like, I gotta do more. I gotta be more productive with my life. I gotta just keep doing it. But I also have to be happy at the same time that I'm doing it. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that, like, in that article that you talked about, it's like, everyone's always working for the future, but they're not living for the now. It's like, yeah. Like, that's everyone I talk to. I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, well, 6 years from now, I'm hoping to get a promotion. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, live for now. Do something now. Be productive with your life. Like, be happy. Like, and they're like, but I'm spending all this time. I'm spending, like, 70 hours a week doing this. I'm like, dude, that's crazy. Like, right now, I do work 2 jobs, and I work around, like, 80 hours a week. Now, I still have fun with life. I still do things outside of it. And I love what I'm doing. And, like, yeah, you can do that, but don't be the person that's just doing that every single day and you're living for, like, when I'm 65, I can retire. You know what I mean?
I think there's a ton to unpack in what you just said, and just to give a bit more context around that article. The basic premise is that when we're young, we're given these maps of how to live, and it's pretty simple. It really depends on what culture and place you grow up in, but it's something like, you know, get good grades, work hard in school, work hard at your sport of choice, go to a good college, get a good job, and so on. But what I learned in my perspective, and this is actually from a pain point that I had, was that once you leave university or wherever you decide to go off in that basic path that we're given, it's really hard to map your way forward, and particularly to map your way forward in a way that is fulfilling for you, because you're really not taught how to do that. You're handed a map, you're told to follow it, and then you either kind of keep going on that. And I think at some point a lot of people realize this isn't so fulfilling. So, you know, to get more specific here, my moment was when I was in investment banking and, you know, had gotten the money, had the prestige of a good job, and, you know, was going to the office for 15 hours a day on someone else's schedule. There's nothing wrong with that path, but for me, there's one fundamental thing that I did, which was ask myself, why am I doing this? And now I do that with everything. You start with why. I kind of realized, well, I'm doing this because that's what I thought was the right path at the time, and I have now a couple of choices. Like, I can keep going on this path, or I can try and carve something else out, which is more ambiguous. My investment banking path had a pretty clear path forward that a lot of people would find attractive. It was going to an adjacent industry called private equity, where at 24 you're making $250,000, $300,000, and you have a good chance getting to Harvard Business School, Wharton Business School, etc. And after that, you have an even greater job, and, you know, all the things that people seem to think that they want. But when I looked at that path, what I saw, at least for myself, was this is traditional. This is not exciting. I personally prefer a bit more uncertainty. So instead, I thought, okay, let me carve out a new reality for myself. And that was a much, in some ways, harder choice at the time, but a much easier path to fulfillment and happiness, because despite not knowing what to do, I just started trying things and eventually kind of have hacked my way into something that's much more aligned with my sense of purpose. But I only did that by, one, hitting the bottom and realizing that my map that I had was not serving me anymore. It got me to the point that I needed it to. And then asking myself why, and then figuring out a way to create a new map.
Yeah, no. And I truly, I believe that, like, what you're talking about is just, like, that's exactly how I think all the time. And that's one of the things, like, I tell, like, Thor's one of the ones, I'm sorry to rag on you, Thor, but Thor's always the one that He's like, I don't know what I want to do. I was like, I get that. I understand that. And you're not going to know what you want to do if you don't do anything. You have to try things in order to find out what you want to do. You don't necessarily have to replicate the lifestyle that I'm living. Like, you don't have to try and be a YouTuber or try and be a gamer or try and be a writer or do any of these things. Whatever you want. It's like you have to try, though. You never know until you actually try those things. And there's a multitude of things that you can come by that's just like, wow, I really love this. Maybe you get into doing something like a podcast like this, but then you're basically working with audio engineering at the same time. You're like, wow, I like how you can move these voices around. I like how you can do this and that. And then you're like, I really would like to actually just work on like a movie production. That'd be super sick. Like, and I could work towards that now that I've found like something I like. It's like always trying to do something in order to find out what you love to do. It's what my thought. It's like, I can't just keep sitting here and be like, well, I don't know what to do. I hate it. And it's like, you don't necessarily even have to do anything for monetization or success, just to be happy. Just have a hobby. Like, that's one of the things that we've become so distant from. It's like, man, collect stamps. If you want to collect stamps, do that. Collect coins, do that. Like, have a hobby. Like, people come up to me now and they're like, oh, that's cool that you do a podcast. They're like, how do you make money off it? And I was like, well, for me, that's not the overarching goal. The overarching goal is just to interact with individuals on a daily basis and have just a conversation like this. We never have this. Everyone's so just stuck on their phone or watching Netflix or something like that. We don't actually have this kind of like intelligent conversation. I say intelligent. Some people might say idiotic, but you know what I mean? It's just like we never get that. It's like, this is like fun to me. It's a hobby. It's like I'm interested in this. Like what I do for work, for money, like I can do it, but it's mundane to me. It's not something that I actually get any enjoyment out of it. And I always, every day is like, I can't wait to do this because this is super fun to me. This is something that like, I'm learning new things. I'm learning new skills and like, I'm intrigued by it. I'll be sitting here just at the computer, just like literally geared in and not listening to anything, but I'm understanding everything and just like coming out to me. But you have to try. Like for this podcast, it took me 2 years before I actually tried to do it. Like I always was telling Thor, like at the gym, like we just got to do it. Let's just do a podcast. Let's just do it.
What got you over the hump?
So what got me over the hump was actually my friend. So my friend up in Canada, he's actually been on this show, so I can actually use his name. His name's Anthony Ricciardi. He's an artist now. He worked a 9-to-5 job as a broker up there in Toronto, and then he quit his job to just be an artist. And he was doing that, and I was like, oh man, I want to do a podcast. He's like, just do it. I'm like, I can't just do it. He's like, why not? He's like, I don't even know what I'm doing right now. He's like, and I'm just doing it. He's like, you just gotta make that leap. And if you're scared to make that leap, that's okay. You'll just be the person that's always greasing the wheels. We need those people, and that's great. But if you have courage, you're going to make the leap and you're going to do it and you're just going to keep doing it. He's like, you're not going to do it and quit. He's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. He's like, if you do it for like 10 episodes, that's stupid. He's like, 40 episodes, I'll shake your hand. So I did 40 episodes. I'm on episode 44 now. And that's what made me take that leap. Just like that push. Another person like behind me that I saw was doing things and I was just like, I don't know what to do. Like I want to do it. I don't know. And then it's just like, it's basically just like fire underneath you, which made me do all this. Now I'm episode 43. This is like my fifth month now doing all of this. And I'm just going to keep going forward because I love doing this. I love like talking to people like this. Greg, I don't really like talking to. It's a co-host that comes on sometimes. But I like having conversations like this. Like, I mean, the conversations like you have in the office, I know maybe you guys can like relate to this. Just like, do you see that new Walking Dead episode? It's like, man, I really don't want to talk about this right now, but this is all I can talk about because that's all you want to talk about. And I don't like those kinds of conversations. I like talking about life, news, technology, your life, understanding you. That's one of the things. I always want to understand other people and their mindset and what drives them and what they think, because I don't want to be so narrow-minded. I've always been narrow-minded. I want to broaden just my understanding of life itself. You know what I mean? So like getting other people to come in here, it's like, no, Logan, you're completely wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. it's like I'll fight you on it and then we'll go down swinging, but I really do enjoy that because then it does broaden my horizon, and I love that. I love stuff like that, and that's what made me take the leap on this. Now, what made you take even a bigger leap on Calvin Rosser to, because you did articles before from what I saw, and then you went and you wanted to do coaching because you just like helping and assisting people. Like I know Thor's always talking about, he's like, yeah, my cousin's helping me. Is that like what you were sought out to do with that?
Yeah. So let me try and take a stab at that. I think a big part of what you're talking about, one, I agree. You can't know if you want to do something until you do it. And one big problem that a lot of people have, and I'll speak to my own experience soon, but is they get caught up in the world of constraints. They think, oh, I can't do the podcast because I won't make money off of that. Or, people are going to judge me, or I'm not good at that, or whatever. But the main thing is you just have to get out there and do it. If you told me that you did one podcast when you wanted to try that, that's great. You don't need to hit 40 because during that first one, you're going to kind of get some energy. You're going to see what that's like. You already took that step, and you took a step that gives you progress. And there's nothing more motivating than progress. And so kind of tying that back to my own journey, did I have any idea that I wanted to be a writer, or perhaps a public speaker, or some of these other things? Not really. My main goal getting out of college was to make money, and I found different pathways to do that. And when I wasn't happy, I chose a different path, and I just started doing things. And on the writing and coaching end, what I realized was I was learning a lot. I told you, learning and contribution are sort of what motivate me. One way to learn and clarify your thoughts and all of this is to write. And I saw that. I was writing for myself. I was journaling, and I was like, hey man. And I was also, by the way, like sharing my ideas with other people, and they seemed to like those ideas. And so I was thinking, okay, how do I do this? And of course it took me months to take that leap to leave my full-time job to become a writer, if you will, because that's a big scary path, and there's no clear way to monetization. But the main thing is starting to pay attention to the things that energize you, to break free from some of those constraints, whether that's financial constraints or mental blockers, and to take the MVP approach to trying things. Like if you want to do a podcast, or you want to be an artist, or you are an artist and you want to try out a 9-to-5, then try those things in small ways and see if you like them. Pay attention to that, even if that means just a couple hours.
Yeah. Now, so you said MVP. That's from a lean startup,
minimum viable product, or basically, think about what is the smallest test that I could do to confirm whether or not this is something I might enjoy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us, we have tons of ideas about things we might want to do. For example, I think I might want to do a podcast. Have I ever run a podcast episode? No. I'm like you. I like understanding people, talking, having ideas, having conversations. And so, yeah, probably it'd be something I like. But do I like editing the audio and all of that? Maybe not. Maybe that's so detrimental to me that I don't want to actually be a podcaster, and I just want to be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, all the time.
You don't know until you actually do it, and I think that's an important lesson of adulthood. Just keep doing things, and realize that your passions and things you like doing will change.
Yeah, no, of course. Now, so Thor, you've been quiet over there a little bit. Now,
Yeah.
I want to get your insight, like looking in, like, what do you think about this? What's a step that you're looking to move forward with, like in life in general? Is there anything on the horizon for you at the moment?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think, a lot of what you talked about, just being open to new experience, things like that. I think that's a huge factor. So right now I'm just kind of, outside of work, I'm working on, just my character, reading different books, trying to see what I'm interested in, trying new things, and just staying open. I think that's a huge part of it. And hopefully I'll find something I like soon, or that, that's going to give me fulfillment and purpose.
I mean, you're going to, because whenever I talk to you, it's just like something ludicrous. I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? It's like, no, this is how it played out. This is what happened. I'm like, how did that even work? I don't know. It just worked out like that. So I believe like you're going to do that. Like I said, when I talk to you all the time, that's one of the things. It's just like, you just got to do it. You just got to do it. But it's a hard thing to like overcome. Like it's super hard to just like actually doing it. And there's, like you said, there's constraints, and I think also with the constraints, you have to open up your mind in regards to like what fulfills you, like what's your purpose. It's not always like monetization. Like I talked about this with my friend Anthony in regards to success and how people scale success. And one of the things that I've always thought about and hated about that scaling was that a lot of individuals scale success based off of monetary value. It's like that's not necessarily what success is. This individual could open up a nonprofit and helping millions of individuals, never maybe make $40,000 a year, but they love their life. They're happy with what they're doing. Like that's successful. Or maybe you're just an individual that loves education and you want to go get a master's and you want to go get a doctorate. And at the end of the day, that doctorate, like you're only making $60,000, but you love that. Like success to me is something that it's a project. It takes time for you to do, but you're loving every single second of it. It's not just this monetary value that's there. It's like, that's the number one thing that everyone thinks about. It's like, how do I make money? How do I make money? How do I make money? It's like, that's what really restricts you in regards to opening up your mind to do more. Because if you're only thinking about making money at the end of the day, you're going to only think in this small little circle and you're never going to open up or broaden your horizon in different things. Maybe you love like crafting wood. You can make money off of being a carpenter, but you're like, oh, they don't make enough money. And so you never move forward with that. But it could have been the happiest years of your life just sitting there crafting wood. It's crazy to me, stuff like that. So there's restrictions and constraints that you have in regards to like monetary value that I always see is like, I'll worry about that. That's like future Logan's problems. It's like at the moment I can sustain life and I love what I'm doing. Now I don't know if you guys feel the same way in regards to something like that.
I mean, so first off, financial constraints they're real.
Yes.
So I would encourage, you get a lot more freedom mentally once you have X number of dollars. I think a lot of people will overestimate how much they need to have that mental freedom. And in fact, I think any money outside of that, the best thing that it provides, it doesn't provide you happiness or anything like that.
Yeah, what was that? Wasn't there a study in regards to that? I think like the maximum happiness was $70,000 or something like that.
Based on some assumptions about your family size. And all this. Like it's actually I won't say a low amount, but it's lower than you might expect. And when you think about success, it's so much more than money, and it's very much based on how you define it and what you want out of life. You have to ask yourself the hard questions. You know, if I die in 5 years, what is it that I actually want to do? Is it to rake in a pile of cash? Maybe. You're probably not going to be that happy playing in that pile of cash if you didn't do it, make it doing something that you love, or at least doing something you love on the side. Another distinction that I think is important is you don't necessarily have to make money doing the things that you love. I think you can have a job that you're reasonably content with and spend a lot of your hours outside of your job, because for most people there are a lot of hours outside the job doing that thing, whether it's podcasting or whatever. You don't have to make your money off of podcasting if you love podcasting. Of course, that's maybe an ideal, but success, if I had to define it, is something. It's more about enjoying the journey. It's not an end point. I think that's another thing. I'm a big goal setter, but by the time I hit my goal, I'm already set another goal. It's the journey, and the hardest thing to do is actually to enjoy that along the way and celebrate the victories and actually say like, whoa, I made some real progress here, and not just keep striving for the next thing, because you always change your benchmark. Once you're rich, you want to either become richer or you want to be happier in this dimension or this dimension, and it's hard. Yeah.
What about you? What about success to you, man?
I mean, I think that's one of the things like that we were talking about earlier. You have to hit that. You have to go through that experience where you're working a job and you think that, what's going to make you happy is, financial freedom. And then once you hit that benchmark where you're making enough money, you're paying your bills, you're able to go out, have a good time, then you realize, oh, maybe this job isn't so fulfilling. And that's when, people like us, we start seeking these other things, trying to explore these other interests, things like that.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand, because that's what I'm saying. Like, I work 80 hours a week to have that financial freedom, and then I can enjoy purchasing stuff like this for utilization. But at the same time, there's an understanding that people are always like, oh, I have to have like the best equipment. I have to have the best this, the best that. I think it was 2016, the #1 documentary worldwide was shot on a Walmart camera, and the cost to shoot that entire documentary was $286. You don't always have to have the best equipment. It's always like the story that you're telling, or like what you're putting out into the world. It's all about the quality of what you're doing. The equipment doesn't matter. Like if you're doing something like podcasting, like you could just shoot it on your phone. But if you're really into it and you love what you're doing, like people will listen. People will always listen because you're great at it. It doesn't necessarily like, yeah, you got to have financial freedoms and you got to overcome that burden. But the equipment also at the same time, like just in this space alone, what I'm talking about doesn't pan out. It doesn't necessarily always pan out. So, but I'm in that financial freedom section, so I can talk more about it. I do understand that there is burdens. People are like, I can't do it. But you don't always have to have the best stuff. Is one of the things.
I actually think when you run lean, you're actually, and by lean I mean a little bit cash strapped or resource constrained. That's when you're most creative. As long as your basic needs are met. You need to have your basic needs met.
Of course.
But after that, like you're like, I need to survive. And when you go into that mode, you start thinking, okay, well, how do I survive?
Yeah.
And at that point, you start getting creative. If you have too much, you get comfortable. I think that's what I see a lot of and that's where I was a bit scared of this other path that I mentioned earlier of making X money, which was very comfortable life, was what does that comfort do to me? Does it keep me being open and curious about the world, or does it put me in a lifestyle where I no longer have to fight in the same way that enabled me to kind of push the needle and kind of move a bit farther ahead? So I think constraints can be a very good thing, particularly when you're building a business. Yeah,
no, and what's crazy, it even ties back into our philosophy talk. That was like one of the things that Stoics did was twice a year, they would just dress up in the worst clothes that they had, lay on the floor, and only eat stale bread and like drink out of a dog dish, like live with those constraints to realize like how good they actually had it, and they can be more creative with what they're doing. They're like, we can just be creative. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, no, I do fully agree with like the Lean. Like if you haven't read the Lean Startup, it's a good book.
It's a good foundational book.
Yeah, it's a good foundational book. Thor, I suggest that you read it.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, I have it. But is there anything else for you guys? Anything moving forward? What about you? You said you're gonna do a podcast hopefully soon. I know you're doing one right now, but like your own podcast.
This is my entry point.
Yeah.
Already addicted. Yeah, I think I'm going to continue writing on calvinrosser.com, and hopefully, I mean, one of my big goals is, become a world-class writer. If you're a good writer, you're a clear thinker, and you can do a lot of things really well, so that's something that's very important to me, but also keep exploring and keep learning.
Yeah.
That's the main thing for me. I have, some things figured out, kind of, but those things will change, and just kind of keeping an open mind and using contribution and learning as my true north are the things that really drive me.
Yeah.
Because I see that progress that comes from that.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to think about life. What about you, Thor? Anything else moving forward for you besides what?
I'm not a writer, but I'm kind of on the same page. I'm exploring new career interests. Yeah. And, like what you said about how you define success. I love working out. I love listening to music. So, like, if I can incorporate those things into my day and explore, new career interests, continue to meet new people, explore like other cultures, things like that, that's what makes me happy. So that's what I'm going to continue to do, and just read books.
Nice.
That's huge. So.
Yeah, no, that's sick. I really do enjoy having you guys on the show. That was a great talk. Maybe hopefully if you're back around, we'll have you again. I know you're around. I always want to do one. He's Norwegian, by the way. And I always want to do one on Norway and the crones and all this other crazy stuff. There's 6 months out of the year. It's dark over there or something like that.
Pretty dark, yeah.
So maybe we can do that finally. Now that you've done your first podcast here, it's not that hard. And we'll do that one actually in the future. And I'm probably just going to keep doing this and just keep utilizing the skills that I'm finding to improve everything. I'm actually going to be I have 2 projects that I'm working on in the near future in regards to a docu-series, like a vlog type of concept. But it's it's like my life and like how I feel about life. And it's going to be hopefully cinematic. I'm still working out a lot of the things. I don't know how all the softwares work, but hopefully I can do that. And then a mini movie that I'm going to be working on, and then doing this podcast at the same time. So hopefully that pans out.
Cool, man. Stay scrappy.
Yeah. But thanks for coming on, you guys.
Thanks
And
for
also,
having
so CalvinRosser.com.
CalvinRosser.com.
Yeah, check out Calvin on his website. Read all of his stuff. It's great stuff. Subscribe to his newsletter every Sunday. I'm about to get it this Sunday. And I hope it's great. All the other stuff was on there. That's great. If it's not, I'm going to email you. It says email you on there. I'm going to email you, say how bad it was. But yeah, go on there, check it out. Learn about his life, see what he thinks about life, and it's great. Thor doesn't have a website, but if you want, you can go to thorjohnson.com and there will be nothing there. But thanks as always, and we'll catch you guys later.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
No problem.